You're watching Cable 8, Greensboro Community Television.
Welcome to Greensboro Glimpses. On this program, we're going to be taking a very interesting look at what it's like to be a professional musician and play in symphony orchestras and other organizations. I'm very happy to have as my guest Anita Cirba, who is the principal trumpet with the Greensboro Symphony, the Winston-Salem Symphony, the Giannini Brass, and maybe some other things too. Anita, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Let's start out by just asking this. People go to concerts and they sometimes or often see the list of musicians in the orchestra, if it's an orchestra concert, and they see the term principal by certain names. What does it mean to be the principal in a section in an orchestra?
It means that you're first chair.
Yeah.
It means you won the audition and that you basically were among maybe 200 people to take the audition, and that they picked you to be the best of those 200.
So does it carry any other responsibilities? I mean, are you responsible for helping the other people in your section with phrasing or with things like that?
All the above.
All the above.
All the above.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to help with the phrasing, with the dynamics, with whatever the conductor says, and I basically carry the whole brass section along with me. So the horns, trombones, and the tuba, and trumpets.
Okay. Well, that leads me to the next thing that I wanted to ask you, and this isn't a sexist comment by any means, but normally you think of most brass players are men, and there are exceptions, of course, but the women tend toward the clarinets and the flutes and those kinds of instruments. What led you to the trumpet as your instrument?
Great question. Yeah, well, when I was in second grade, my parents bought my sisters and myself and my brother a Mickey Mouse band set, and because I was so shy, I have a sister who has cerebral palsy. And my siblings went to these instruments, and what was left was a toy plastic white and orange trumpet. And I picked it up, and you can only play, da ba ba ba, and of course you can't really play anything on that. But my dad had all kinds of Tijuana brass records around the house, Lawrence Welk, Herb Albert, Al Hurt records, and he said, "Here, let me hear you play something." And so he stuck it on the LP onto the old recordings, and stereo. And I started playing ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. So then within a couple of weeks...
Spanish Flea.
Yeah, Spanish Flea.
Yeah.
Within a couple of weeks, they went down here to More Music, and they bought me or rented me for $10 a month a real trumpet. And so I started playing, and then when I got to the 5th grade, I joined the band at Joyner Elementary School here in Greensboro, and my first band director was a woman trumpet player, Ann Shipwash.
Yeah,
and I just thought, this is amazing. If she can do this, I can do it. So I played in the band at Joyner for 5th and 6th grade. I followed her to Mendenhall to play, because she was the band director over there as well. Then went over to Proximity, and then over to Mendenhall. Then when I was at her house one afternoon into the summer of going into my 11th grade year. She had me in one of the rooms, and she was in the other room, and unbeknownst to me, she was taping me the Haydn trumpet, the second movement of the Haydn Trumpet Concerto, and the first characteristic study of the Arbenz book. And I was sitting there really not even knowing she was taping me, and then about 2 weeks later, I got an acceptance from the School of the Arts in Winston-Salem that I had been accepted. So I figured that if she could do this, I had the skills, or thought that I had the skills to do this. Yeah, I don't really know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I just thought it was fascinating that a woman could pick up a trumpet and be versatile with it.
Yeah.
So I just followed suit.
And you went from there, you went to the School of the Arts, and from there you went to a conservatory?
I did. I went to the School of the Arts for high school and 4 years of college. And then as I was going into the summer of 1980, I was at Brevard Music Camp, and I met a friend of mine who went to the Cleveland Institute of Music up in Ohio. And she said, "You need to go." And I didn't say, "No, I'm not good enough to get in there. I can't do this." But she said, No, you have to try. So I went. The only recruiter of that whole summer that came, there were like 26 recruiters there. One of the recruiters was the dean of music at the Cleveland Institute of Music. And she heard me within a couple of minutes, and she said, "We have to get you here to the school." So I wound up at the Cleveland Institute of Music,
Wow.
and I studied with Bernard Edelstein for 2 years.
And you played with the Cleveland Symphony.
I played with the Cleveland Orchestra when I was up there in my second year of school, and we went to Carnegie Hall and played the first trumpet off stage on the Verdi Requiem. And Lauren Mazel was the conductor, and I was about as close from here to that door as he was, and it was fascinating. It was like, this was my big gig, it was great.
Yeah, probably some of the people watching aren't musicians or into all this sort of thing, but Mazel is a biggie in the world of conducting and
Sure
in
is.
orchestra. Yeah, so I'm sure that was quite an experience for you.
Definitely.
Yeah. What other conductors have you played under, famous conductors?
Well, it depends on what you mean famous is.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, Lauren Mazel was the biggie.
Yeah, sure.
I played with Albert Chaffoux in the Salisbury Symphony.
Yeah.
I played with Peter Perez, my conductor in the Winston-Salem Symphony, when I came back from Cleveland. And then Stewart Molina, of course, was here in Greensboro. And then the Dima Sikovetzky, of course, right now. Fabulous musician.
Yeah, he's been on this. I've had him on this program. Yeah.
Fabulous
Yes,
musician.
he is, yeah.
And, of course, Robert Moody is the conductor of the Winston-Salem Symphony, who I just adore to pieces. And he's fabulous
Reminds
as well.
me of Keith Lockhart. Does he remind you of Keith Lockhart?
Yeah.
The conductor of the Boston Symphony,
Yeah,
Boston Pops.
yes,
Yeah,
very charming.
He really does. Yeah,
Very charming.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So those are the ones. I mean, now my trumpet teachers, I have actually been extremely famous with like Alan Dean from the New York Brass Quintet and Raymond Mace from the American Brass Quintet. And I've studied with Eddie Carroll, and Mark Gould was when I went to the International Music Program with the School of the Arts. Mark Gould, who used to be principal trumpet in the Met, I was sandwiched in between him and Edward Carroll.
Oh, yeah.
And what a fascinating experience.
You mentioned the New York Brass. Did you ever get to meet Joseph Felice? He's sort of my idol as a
No, but I know,
trombonist.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know who that is, but I never got to meet him.
Yeah. All right, very well. You mentioned Stewart Molina, so that leads me to something else that I wanted to ask you. It seems like with the Stewart Molina area, the Greensboro Symphony took a giant leap forward, and it has been going forward ever since then. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely, absolutely. Stewart instilled a lot of, not that Fuchs did not. One of Fuchs's, obviously he was Stewart's predecessor, and he was a fabulous musician. I didn't have a chance except for maybe a half a year to play with Fuchs, but an interesting musician. Very, very good with that. But Stewart brought the orchestra to a different level of dynamics, discipline. He went into he chartered different music that was more, it was just more extensive that the orchestra was challenged with. And I loved his time here. And talking about charisma with the audience.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Brought the audience in with us. I believe that they felt like they were playing the instruments themselves. So, but I love Stewart. I'm so happy where he is right now up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I remember when he was doing the Spoleto down in Charleston too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Well, the orchestra. Let me ask you are there any full-time quote unquote musicians in an orchestra, say like Greensboro or Winston-Salem?
No.
Yeah.
The symphony pays us on a per service basis. So the hours it would take for us to be a
service being
full-time
a concert or a rehearsal or any time you play, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. About 2.5 hour period
Right.
of time
Right.
for that extended time. So we get paid per service, and so the hours that we have don't let that be a full-time orchestra. So most of us, as a principal in both Winston-Salem and Greensboro, even with that income, I still have to make up by doing other things. So I have a studio of trumpet students, and I play almost at every church there is in town, and play with different brass quartets and quintets around the area in order to make a living. There are some musicians in the orchestra who do work 9 to 5 at other jobs in order to make up for that
Pay the
income.
bills.
Pay the bills, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, I know that the orchestra, the Greensboro Orchestra, and I'm sure the Winston Orchestra too, has some endowed chairs.
Yes, sir.
which helps to support that. Do those players make more than the others, or is that just simply to help support the orchestra in general?
I think that helps support the orchestra in general.
Yeah.
And it's a really wonderful thing to have. I wish we got the money that they put into those chairs.
Right.
But it's okay, because, I mean, we do this for the love anyway.
Sure.
You know.
Where do you see the orchestra going? I mean, an orchestra, say, like Greensboro, what do you see as the future? Do you think it'll ever evolve into? We haven't quite in Greensboro reached the status even of the Charlotte Orchestra, which is now listed as one of the major symphony orchestras. We're not quite there yet in Greensboro. Do you see us getting to that level?
I think musicianship-wise, we are at that level. I just think that the area doesn't support enough that the Charlotte Orchestra does, the Charlotte Symphony gets.
Well, the ASOL, the American Symphony Orchestra League, ranks those by budget, which may not be a fair way to do it.
Yeah, and I do believe that the Greensboro is in the, it's pretty high, but it still doesn't give us that amount of money to make even a living at. And I really don't want to go into the exact detail numbers.
No.
But I do foresee in the near future. I believe there is a strategic planning that I got very fortunate to be on, a committee that is talking about the next 5 years of growth between the Winston-Salem and the Greensboro Symphonies. I don't know how extensive that's going to be and if it's going to come to fruition, but there is talk about that. So hopefully we will have at least some kind of a core orchestra. I've been trying to do this for like 20 years, but it's just becoming available now, at least in talk.
Is there any sense of competition between Greensboro and Winston-Salem?
Well, about 65% of us play in both orchestras.
Yeah.
And so it's really not too much of a competition. In fact, with the exception of this particular year, the entire trumpet section is the same. My second trumpet player, Ken Wilmot, plays in both orchestras, as well as Carl Kasner.
Okay.
And so it's really fortunate for me because there's no competition there. We just all play the same, and we're both, we're the same section that's the same in both orchestras. And I think that's they're trying, the board and the orchestra committee is trying to go to that point where we do have the same members in both orchestras to make up that one core.
Well, that would be interesting, to do that, yeah. Let me ask you to contrast, if you can, the difference between, say, a Cleveland orchestra, which would be considered one of the major orchestras or semi-major orchestras in the country, and an orchestra like Greensboro in terms of how many rehearsals it takes before a performance, that kind of thing.
Well, actually, that's a great question. I believe they do around the same rehearsal schedule. When I was fortunate to be up in Cleveland, I did sit in to a couple of rehearsals. Those people have been playing for years, and they are getting an incredible amount of money to play. So they know they don't have to take other jobs to play in that orchestra or in the top 5 orchestras in the country. So they know what they're expected to do. I do, however, believe that even though the money that we make in the Greensboro and in the Winston-Salem Symphonies, we still have people in the orchestras that are just as competent musicians as those who are in major orchestras. Even though we get a lot less pay. And we do like 4.5 to 5 rehearsals for each concert, a classical concert. With our pops, we generally have 1 or 2 rehearsals for the pop series before the concert.
Yeah, it's interesting because the concerts are very, very good. I mean, in fact, I heard somebody who probably wasn't sophisticated as far as musical knowledge, but came out and said, I didn't hear any wrong notes.
Being a trumpet player, if you miss a note, you better play it loud.
Well, you don't keep your job long in most orchestras if you miss too many notes.
That's true.
I don't know whether people will be interested in this or not, but I'll share it with you.
Sure.
I was at the Metropolitan Opera in New York one time. They were doing Siegfried, and the horn calls in the opera Siegfried. Well, I heard the horn player just absolutely butcher it on this particular performance.
In the Met.
In the Met, and it was awful. And I thought, how in the world did that guy get that job?
It could have been a sub.
Well, it might have been. Yeah. I'm sure he didn't keep it long if he did, but it was really something.
Well, and that is a good observation because it's extremely hard, as you know, as a brass player.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
To keep that going.
You bet it is. And that leads me to something else I wanted to ask you. I know as a brass player that if you don't play almost every day, your lip will deteriorate in a big hurry. How many hours a day do you have to practice?
Honestly?
Yeah.
And I have friends out here listening now.
Yeah.
Now this is the honest to God truth.
That's what we want.
And people are and I hope my students aren't watching. I can't believe I'm saying that. I don't really practice.
Okay.
I do a lot of playing.
Sure.
Well,
Well,
and so the trumpet is on my